Hey guys, I know with a lot of schools, starting with my school, Dartmouth, reinstating the testing requirement, a lot of thought has been going to that lately. And especially with it being one of the biggest aspects of your college application, there's kind of a lot of stress involved and it's one of the harder things to do. So today I thought I would just break down my testing process, how I went through taking the ACT, and try to give you guys some tips on how to approach either the ACT or SAT for college admissions. One thing we always talk about at collegeconsulting.us is take them blind. Now, this might be counterintuitive. Why would you ever take a test that you didn't study at all for? Well, there's a couple reasons. The first of which is if you take both of them, the SAT and ACT blind, you can kind of figure out which format you like more, which test you do better on, whether your struggle is lack of time or content, and then you get a pick after that. Because a myth I kind of had in my head when I went through the testing process in college admissions was you had to take them both. If you wanted to apply to East Coast or West Coast schools, I live in the Midwest, you needed the SAT instead of the ACT. I don't know where I heard that. You only need one. Maybe back in the day, you needed like a specific test to apply to a specific school. But now it's just ACT, SAT, you pick your better one and you submit them to all the schools, which is great because that's how it should be. So take them blind is the first step. And then you kind of get to decide, okay, which test am I better at? For me, it was always the ACT. I never even took the SAT. So even if you just take one of them blind, that's fine. Because the second benefit of taking them blind is you get to see what sections you're weak at or what your struggles is. Again, is it time? Is it the content? Is it the English section? Is it testing in a large room with a lot of people? What was your weakness? And you get to learn that by taking it blind. But also when you take it blind, there's not a lot of pressure, you know you're going to take it again unless you get like an awesome score, which would just be amazing. So there's not a lot of pressure, but you get to really kind of touch and feel and find things out. So I took it blind for the first time in 8th grade. I don't really know why. I think a teacher recommended it to me, or I thought it'd be fun. There's like a program where they would like send kids to take the ACT when they were little, I guess. But so I did that, and I got a feel for what was hard about the test, what the time was like, what sections I struggled on. And for me, I did really well on math, science, and reading for an 8th grader at least. And I was like, okay. But I did terrible on English, like terrible, which is great. There was no stakes on that test. I mean, I wasn't going to submit my 8th grade score to colleges. And yeah, so after taking it blind, I got to figure out what test is best for me and what's my weakness. Now, you might be thinking, oh, I can only take it 1 or 2 times because I have to submit all my scores to the colleges. No, you don't have to do that. You literally just submit your best score. You can take it as many times as you want. Again, that was something I was worried about back then. That is not a thing. Just take it as many times as you want. Some schools even super score and take your best section from each test you take. So, of course you should take it many times. Now, after you take it blind, what should you do? Well, you're going to take it again, obviously. And for that one, you're going to study your weaknesses. This is very straightforward and hopefully is what you're always already thinking about after you find your weakness on the first test. So for me, I took my second test 2 years later, sophomore year, and I knew I was terrible at English. So I should have spent most of my time studying for English. Instead, I probably did like a 50% English, 50% the rest of them, which made no sense because I was really good at the rest of them, but I was terrible at English. So based on that, I improved my score in all the sections from my 8th grade year, and I improved it in English a little bit. But my English was still significantly lacking behind my math, science, and reading. Matter of fact, on my sophomore year one, I got a 34 with a 36 in English and math, or not English, 36 in reading and math, a 35 in science, but a 30 in English. So if that English was higher, it would have been a 36 and I would have been done. Instead, I took my sophomore year, got that 34, and I was like, I can still do more. I feel like I can really work on this English section. So when I say study your weaknesses, I really mean study your weaknesses. I feel like I probably should have done an 80-20 split, 80% on English, 20% on the rest. Now, here's what's not to do. Learn the content / format. Again, very straightforward. I said here's what's not to do. This is because this is what I did not do. I took it again my junior year. a year after that test sophomore year, and I'm like, oh, I'm way better at English now. I didn't study. I didn't even remember the format. I went into the test and completely bombed it. I forgot. I thought the reading had 60 minutes, and no, it was 40 minutes. So I completely messed everything up. I left the testing center. I'm like, what a waste of my time. Like, I went in there kind of without studying, without even knowing the format, and I did terribly. So learn the content and format. I almost shouldn't even put that up there, but for someone like me who, sometimes forgets to do that, this is very important. You can make the format your ally. Time is low. That means everyone's going to struggle. So there's certain niche tips you can kind of take to do better with time. One of them is you don't shade in the bubbles. You just circle the answers on the testing doc. And then after like every 10 questions, then you shade the bubbles in. It saves like probably a minute per 10 questions, which is huge. And there's a bunch of other tips like that. Now, finally, we're going to my senior year and I'm deciding to take it again. I got the 34 sophomore year, but I can do better than that. It's just the English section. And finally, I learned how to study. So I remember this tip, study my weaknesses, and I spent about 80% of my time on English. Now, how did I study it? Study in chunks. This is huge. When I studied for my sophomore year test, I was very lackluster. I would open the textbook, do a couple problems, scroll on my phone, open the textbook, cycle through that. That's not the way to do it. You waste so much time, so much more time than you think doing that. I probably spent the same amount of time studying for my sophomore year one and my senior year one, but my senior year test, I was so much more focused. I would open the textbook. I would do 50 problems in a row. I would close the textbook, I'd be done for the day. I wouldn't take any breaks. I would just be focused for an hour on what I was doing, and then I'd be done. And I did this every single morning before that test. Because I took my test early in the school year, so I had the whole summer, the whole end of summer, to just spend 1 hour every morning, whenever I woke up, just on studying. So study in chunks. I promise you, you'll save so much more time doing this than like studying a little bit, then looking at your phone, studying a little bit, then looking at your phone. I studied in hour chunks probably for about a month before I took the test. So I spent 30 hours total. And that was pretty much all studying the English section. But again, I did learn the content and the format. Now, what should we be studying from? Well, the first is practice tests. And the second is practice problems. Now, those kind of sound like the same thing, but they're a little different. So practice tests, you can pretty much find these everywhere online. The ACT website, for me at least, I'm not sure about the SAT. You'd have to look it up. ACT website gives you a practice test that you can take with the time, and that's awesome. So I did that at the start of my studying journey, and then after taking some practice tests and figuring out each section, making sure I knew the time, I literally just worked on practice problems. It was English practice problem after English practice problem after English practice problem. And where do you get these practice problems? Well, online or in a ACT, SAT textbook. The one I did, I think was called like Path to a 36 or something like that. I mean, you can find great ones online if you literally just look up like best ACT textbook for 36. And yeah, practice problems and practice tests all day, every day, by all day, every day. I mean, an hour every morning. It wasn't too rigorous. Yes, you're going to have to spend some time studying the techniques, especially for the English section. There's some like comma rules to memorize and stuff like that. But the amount of rules kind of pales to how much time you need to be doing just actual problems and applying the rules. So I know for like the first couple days studying, I would like read through the English rules. I'd be like, okay, what are these 8 comma rules? Do I have them memorized? Yes. What's a semicolon? What's a colon? When do I use dashes? What word do I use here? What's some like tips for when I should put no change versus this sentence versus this sentence? Yeah, that was a couple days, couple 1 hour chunks dedicated to that. With the rest of them, I was just practice problem after practice problem, making sure I had it down. And I mean, if you just read through a textbook, it's going to guide you through that. Like, that's the great thing about these books is you don't have to think about learning the content or format, studying in chunks, practice tests, practice problems, when to study the actual techniques you use, because the book just leads you through it all, which is great. I mean, I like to think I'm a decent teacher showing you guys all this, but the books are just amazing. So I'd highly recommend, especially if that's your learning style, look up one of the ACT, SAT books and go off of that. So you've done your practice problems, done your practice tests, you've learned the content format, you're studying in chunks, you're ready, you're approaching test day. You should be so confident test day. This is what we say in the program. You shouldn't even be nervous, honestly, when you're taking the test because you've done it so many times. I know when I went to take my final test senior year, I kind of walked in there and I was like, hi, today's my day. I was treating it like a sports game. I was treating it like I was about to go play the biggest 18-hole match of my life. I'm a golfer, so that's the kind of metaphor I use. But you're just walking in there determined, and you know you've done the preparation. So yes, you might be nervous. I mean, I was kind of nervous. I was like, okay, this is my last attempt. I really got to throw my all at it. But at a certain point, after you've done so many practice problems and so many practice tests, it almost becomes second nature. You're like, dude, I've been answering this every morning for the past month. I can easily do this. And you just get in a flow state. It's awesome. So this is how I'd recommend approaching standardized tests. But again, if you got to take anything away from this, it's just these three right here. Study in chunks and just do practice tests and practice problems. Especially study in chunks, because I don't want you to spend 80 hours, 100 hours studying for this. Just spend an hour, maybe 2 hours every morning working on your weaknesses, and in due time, you'll be killing the test. So yeah, these are the tips I have for you. This is kind of how my journey went, taking the test 4 different times, 8th grade, sophomore, junior, senior. Senior year, I finally got a 36, brought my English score up to a 35, the rest of them 36s. It was awesome. Yeah, I was really proud of myself too, because when you take a weakness like English and you turn it into a strength, it's just something to feel good about. And I hope you guys all can do the same, especially with applying this format. So thank you. Good luck on your test.